Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is with great honor that we gather here today to welcome Professor Alan Macfarlane. Professor Macfarlane is Professor of Social Anthropology at the University of Cambridge, Fellow of King's College, Cambridge, and Fellow of British Academy. His insights have shaped our understanding of history, anthropology, and the complexities of human civilization. Professor Macfarlane's esteemed reputation extends not only within academic circles, but also resonates in the realms of art and science. He has published numerous influential books, including The Origins of English Individualism, Glass, A World History, Green Gold, The Empire of Tea, and Japan Through the Looking Glass, my personal favorite. His works have all been translated into multiple languages. Today, he's going to give us a speech on intelligent machines, analyzing the development of modern computers and artificial intelligence from an anthropological perspective. Let's give him a warm welcome.
Thank you.
你好。So it is a great pleasure and honor to have this chance to talk to some of your students and staff at this notable University of Shenzhen, and thank you for coming. I recognize some of you wearing different clothes today, but I can still recognize you, and I'm looking forward to having your questions. I will talk for about 50 minutes, and then look forward to having questions from you. I don't know how many of you know when, where, and by whom the idea of artificial intelligence, and at the same time the idea of an electronic computer was invented. How many of you think you know who, when, and where this happened? Anyone? No. Sorry.
1947.
1947, no. Alan Turing, yes. So it happened in March 1936 in my college at Cambridge, King's College at Cambridge, just in the courtyard by the bridge near the stone in memory of your great poet Jules Moll. And Alan Turing, in March 1936, went up into his room and he wrote the paper on the computability of numbers and the uncertainty problem, which specified the Turing machine and the idea of a programmable machine that could learn. So my college has been deeply associated with the development of computers, and Cambridge also for a long time before that, because as some of you will know, the first working computer was made by Charles Babbage more than 100 years before Turing, but it was a machine, it wasn't electronic, and he was from Cambridge. And then the first working electronic computer in the world that actually gave an accurate result was made in Cambridge by Morris Wilks just before the machine in Manchester and in America. And then, much later, in my second college, a man came to study psychology, and his name was Jeff Hinton, and he had the idea of neural networks as a form of artificial intelligence. So he is known as the godfather of modern artificial intelligence. And a year or two ago he resigned from being head of Google because he was worried about what was happening. So my interest in, I'm going to speak about my own life and the involvement of my wife, Sarah, who's sitting at the front here, because we have lived through the computer revolution. We are both in our 80s, so we have watched the world, which you won't know, changing from the pre-computer age to the computer age. And in the projects which we were involved with, we played a part in that revolution, a part which is not known about it. None of you will know about it, and indeed most people know nothing about it. And it is the next great step in the development of intelligent machines. So I am speaking quite slowly. Can most of you understand what I'm saying? Yeah? But those who can't won't know what the question was, so we'll say nothing. When I was about 18 years old, I started to collect all sorts of facts, quotations, ideas, summaries, statistics. And when I went to Oxford University to study history, I started to use a method which had been invented quite a time before by the founders of the London School of Economics, Sydney and Beatrice Webb. And it was known as the method of one fact, one card. So you have one little card, and on it you wrote a fact. And this method was one that I found very interesting and attractive. So gradually, as an undergraduate at Oxford, and accumulated lots of little cards with facts on them. The idea is that the world comes to you in all sorts of different forms and shapes, and different books and articles and films and conversations. And you take out these bits of information and you link them together. And connecting information is the essence of research. To make a new combination from things which are there and there together is what research is about. When I did my doctoral research at Oxford on the history of witchcraft in England, I continued to this method of hand indexing, so that by 1986 I had about 30,000 little cards. What I was not told is that there is a law of information retrieval which states that as the number of little cards increases, the difficulty of finding the card you put 5 years ago, or of putting a new card into the system, goes up at an exponential rate. The difficulty goes up like this. So it's very easy to add or find 100th or even 1,000th card. When you get to 30,000, it takes you an awful long time to work out where to put the card, where to find the card. And that's your classification system, which has to be hierarchical, changes in your mind. You have to remember what your state of mind was 10 years ago when you found this bit of information. That's where it will be. So the system became unusable. At the same time, when I was doing my thesis on witchcraft, I had all these cases of people who had been accused of being witches. And so I thought there were various variables, men, women, certain age, certain occupation, certain village. And it would be sensible to get a computer to try and work out the correlations between these variables. When I went to the Oxford Computing Service in 1964, they said, oh no, this is just such a small number we're dealing with, 1,000 cases, and the computers are so stupid and slow that it would be much quicker for you to do it with a system which was fashionable at that time. It was called the Cope chat method. You won't have heard of this, but basically you have cards with little holes at the top, and you punch a hole here. If it was a male, you punched it. If it was a female, you left it unpunched. And you went round punching these, and then you stuck a needle through all the holes, and some of them came up, all the men came up, and then you stuck a needle, all the people in a certain place came up. So it was a hand computing system, and so I used that. The next stage in my development was when I became trained as an anthropologist. I went to the Himalayas, Nepal. Have any of you been to Nepal? You sure? Yeah, it has, but no one else. Well, you should go. Beautiful place. Annapurna Mountains. And there's a direct flight from China to Nepal. And there, the next stage was that I realized that in absorbing information about the world, as a historian I had done it through documents, and perhaps a little through architecture and one or two things. But in the world of the mountains and Nepal, there were all these wonderful events going on, rituals and healing and shamans and marriages and all sorts of things, which you couldn't just write down a description of them. You needed to see them and hear them. So in 1968-9, when I was there, I bought a little camera, Japanese camera, and filmed what was happening in this village. Subsequently, my wife and I have been another 19 times to this village, and I have filmed how it changed over a period of 50 years. And so you now have different sources of information, and how are you going to make sense of it? My serious work on digital media began in 1973 when I became a research fellow at King's College in Cambridge. And I was very fortunate because at that time there was a research centre in King's, and they were running a special project on information retrieval systems. number of computer scientists and mathematicians are working on that. And that fed into our project, as I'll explain. My wife and I had started a project before I went to Cambridge on English historical records. And the idea was that just at that time, a whole revolution in our understanding of the past was occurring in Europe in two ways. One was that the lost records, like lost civilization, which had been lost for 300-400 years because no one had looked at, they were refound because there was money, there was a reorganization of local government, and so you had places where all these records, which had been scattered and stored in people's attics or in basements, suddenly were available to historians about ordinary people's lives 300-400-500 years ago. And this was an archival revolution. And at the same time, I was trained as an anthropologist and a historian, and I was attempting to bring these two disciplines together. So I was asking new questions about new kinds of evidence. And if ever any of you have the wonderful good fortune to be in a position where you see a whole new world, maybe in astronomy, maybe in medicine, which no one has ever seen before, like seeing a new continent. That is the experience which my wife and I had in the early 1970s. And we explained what we were doing to a mathematician in my college at Cambridge, Dr. Ken Moody. And he said, he worked in the computer lab then, and computers had been going for about 20 years. And he said, what you're trying to do in making all these different bits of information together is something that a computer should be able to do. And we in the computer laboratory need a project like this to take the next step in the development of computing. Now, we should have listened carefully when he said computers should be able to do this, because he didn't say they will be able to. So we spent, in particular Sarah, a huge amount of work trying to teach computers. If you remember, any of you who have read Alan Turing's famous paper, what he said, one of the things he said was, a computer now is a universal machine, a Turing machine, which can solve any problem that can be solved. Anything, any problem in the world that can be solved logically, this machine should be able to solve. And one aspect of this, which is the artificial intelligence, is that the computer is like a child. It knows nothing, as a child knows nothing. So you explain to it, you teach the computer to understand the world. This is what Turing's brilliant idea was. But what our friend in the computer lab didn't explain, but we soon found out, was that computers had only taken the first step since Turing. They only understood numbers. They didn't understand the human world at all. They didn't understand natural language. So, I'll see if we can get anyone with this thing. This is an outline of my talk. A brief history of up to 1972, which I've given to family and children. The project I'm now about to describe, from 1973 to 92, and then after 1992. So, someone is switching it on for me.
Yeah.
So, the world I grew up with, Sarah, is represented by this picture of where we were in Cambridge. This is our home. This is our half of our library. And this is Sarah there. And you can see books and books and books. And that was the world I was born into, and was shifting, moving on to the next world. Moving on?
Yeah.
That next world had been invented by Alan Turing there, and over 100 years before, the calculating machine that Charles Babbage developed, the first computer. Okay? So I was describing to you discovering a parallel world, the social history revolution of the 1960s, and reconstructing the past by bringing different sources together. The primitive state of computers in 1973 would be something you would hardly imagine. Firstly, to get the text into a computer, any kind of language text, was enormously difficult. You had to have a huge, great machine. I'll show you a picture in a minute, which you typed, and it typed in uppercase. So if you wanted to type ordinary English lowercase, you had to press a button and type it lowercase. It was so noisy that you had to have ear protectors. So it was extremely difficult to work with. And the rest of my talk will describe the next pages, adding meaning, holding materials, searching, and multimedia. So the next is, so this is Maurice Wilkes, who made the first working computer in the world, at SAP, I think it is. And this is a computer which took most of the computer building like this, and it was roughly 1,000,000 times less powerful than your smartphone. The whole of this could only store 30 megabytes of information. And it worked at a speed of about 1/1,000,000th of the speed of your smartphone. So 1,000,000 of these were fit onto your smartphone when we started. I'm not sure where I got this as well. Is this better for you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So this was what it was like when we started. Next one, please. So this is the problem. Turing had invented the idea of a computer and then helped make one which was developed in Manchester. But this computer understood nothing except 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Didn't understand language at all. So how was a historian like ourselves going to make it useful for analyzing something like this? This is a document from England in the 17th century. It's a case on which I wrote a book about some bandits and highwaymen and criminals, and it is for us quite easy to read. I'll show you more difficult. So it starts. This informant said that on Thursday, the 19th day of October last, he, this informant, going on the King's Highway from the market of Kirby Longstead to his own house. Now, you would know what that date meant, the 13th of October. They wouldn't know what Kirby Longstead was, which is a town. They wouldn't know what informant was or anything. Completely nonsense. And many of the documents were more difficult than that to read. Here is one written in a church court. The person in the court is scribbling very quickly, and partly in Latin. This is the translation below. So the top there says, "Compare dictus abbot in dominus objectis." So that's Latin. So the said abbot, this is the person's name, appeared, and the judge accused him that he had various affairs with various other people in the prison. So how are you going to explain this to a computer? So the beginnings of artificial intelligence, as we now use it in language learning models and so on, was impossible. Don't move on until I suggest moving on. It was impossible until you could explain to a computer what this could possibly mean. What is a daughter? Yeah, live with the new wife. What is a wife? The computer doesn't know what a wife is. Doesn't know that a wife implies marriage between a man and a woman. Doesn't know that a daughter is a female person descended from a father and mother. Doesn't know what incontinent, which means having sexual affairs with, means. So you gradually got to, as Turing said, you've got to turn the computer into something that can begin to understand what a human child is for, what a mother, a father is, a daughter, a sister, death, life. And no one in the world had ever done this. We were the first project that was doing this. And Cambridge at that time was at the forefront of natural language parsing. So turning ordinary language like English and Chinese into a coded form which a computer could begin to understand. So next one, please. And so we wrote 2 books describing what our method was for doing this. One was reconstructing historical communities with Sarah and with the computer programmer with whom we worked. And this is just an illustration of the beginning of the document. Next one. Alongside, because the computer was so primitive, Sarah did a parallel study using little paper slips of the kind I mentioned. So all these drawers here have thousands and thousands and thousands of little paper slips, different colors, about the life of each person in this village over a period of 400 or 500 years, and the original sources here. So this is in my room. This is the room where the Nobel Prize for the discovery of pulsars occurred just before we moved in. Next one. And here you can see just a couple of the drawers and all the work that Sarah did to reconstruct or reconstitute the individuals. All this was on Sarah's mind, and it's absolutely amazing piece of work, working as you do. Long sorting out these cards and saying this must be related to that and so on. So this is a hand version of what we wanted to put in the computer. Next. This I mentioned the primitive machinery. This was a lecture writer, and as I say, you had to press a key to type ordinary, and it used this paper tape, which often broke and you had to feed into the computer very slowly. So it took hundreds of times more time to get material in than it takes me now more pages. Next. Now, the challenge was to explain to a computer what the real natural world described in the documents was. And so, a man who co-wrote the book, Charles Darwin, wrote a system based on English language, which explains to the computer by a system of brackets and letters, tells the computer this is a date, D for date. This is a person, E for person, who has a name, Robert Cobb, who has a kinship relation, K, son of a person named John Cobb, who is married. So that's just one tiny entry from a very old register explaining through the bracketing system. Now, it's not widely recognized that this bracketing system is the direct ancestor of all the systems that were developed later, HTML, something we may use, XML, and other systems to explain to computers what things mean, were anticipated by about 15 years by this system. So this was a huge challenge, and it's the next step in teaching Turing machine about our natural world. This is a name, this is a date, this is a person. Right, next. The computers themselves were going through a revolution. I showed you that huge, great computer. That huge, great computer was about as powerful as this. This is 1982. This is the first laptop, or very heavy as a laptop, as you can see, or desktop. And you put in the program disk here and the data disk up there. Each of these was 78 megabytes. Oh, 78K kilobytes. Tiny, a few sentences. So the program could be very small in the data. And the screen was so small you couldn't see a whole sentence. You had to push the sentence across. So this was called an Osborne 2. And so it's the first, Osborne was the first laptop or desktop of that kind, and we had one in our project in 1982. Next, please. And after the first phase of our project, there was a new, equally difficult problem, which had not been solved by Turing or previous programmers. Okay, so you get the material into the computer in a form that the computer can make some sense of it. This is a person, this is a date. But how do you find it? What database system can you use to locate what you're looking for? And at that time, there was no proper system to hold this new wealth of material which we were putting in. So we were joined in the project by Tim King here, and his wife Jessica, who was working on the data. And they're working around the time, about 1980, on a link to the main computer, which is in another building. This link, this screen, is also linked on something that was invented in Cambridge, which was called the Cambridge ring. So you had wires between all the different colleges and departments. So it was the first internet, though it was called an intranet. And around this time, quite a young American came down and had a look at this and said, "What's this?" And so Tim said, "This is an intranet." And he said, "Gee, that's the future." This was Bill Gates. So the first time Bill Gates of Microsoft saw an intranet was in this project here. Now, the project which Tim was involved with was how to set up a database system, management system, DBMS, which would hold thousands and thousands of different bits of text and make it possible for you to find the text very, very quickly. And the first systems that were developed in the world were called Boolean systems. Boole was an Irish mathematician, and Boolean logic is and or not logic. So and so, but not so. So intersections. And it's based on a hierarchical model. We put data in under a major heading, subheading, subheading, sub. And then you search for all the people in Shenzhen University, aged between X and Y, who are reading management studies and outcome all length. It was used by businesses to find all the customers who wanted to buy certain kind of food or whatever. It's fine as a system for finding what you know is there and bringing it all together. And Tim worked in the IBM Research Centre in the north of England, which was doing the most advanced research on this. He brought down their system, PRTV, into the retrieval system, rewrote it, made it twice as fast, 3 times as dependable, and later it became, he took it from America, and it became the disk operating system for a new kind of computer called an Amiga DOS with 10. The disadvantage of this system is you've got to know what it is you're searching for, and then you will find it. What we were looking for was a system where you didn't know what you were looking for, and yet you could find it. And this required a whole new philosophy of searching, which by great good fortune, as I mentioned, King's College had a research centre and a brilliant computer analyst there, Heath and myself there, and a colleague, in 1983, invented a new form of search system, which is behind all ones that you use, for example, Google. It's called fuzzy searching, fuzzy logic, and it's based on a different kind of mathematics, invented by a man called Bayes, B-A-Y-E. So it's known as Bayesian search systems, or probabilistic search systems. It works on the idea that answers not correctly, not incorrect. They are more or less correct. So the system that he invented and then was made by a friend, non-computer expert, Martin Porter, with whom I worked for some years, that system allowed you to put in a question in normal language, and it would give you what was the best answer, as does Google. Next best. We would take all the words in the database, give them a weighting, say this is an important word, for searching, this is an important word. Wait at everything up, and then from your query, it goes through all the whole database and give you an answer in half a second or so, in a probable order. And then a feature of artificial intelligence, you could then, with the human, improve the question. So, probabilistic searching with feedback. So you can say, yes, that's a good answer, that's a good answer, and you tell the computer these look like what I'm looking for. It then recalculates it all and gives you a better answer. So it's circular. So we implemented that system in another project which we were developing in the 1980s. Next. So the first system, the data management system based on Boolean logic called COD, partly after the name of a very famous database management system expert who wrote books on it. And that's one of the specifications of articles about how it works. Next one. And then the probabilistic system was developed by Martin Porter and Muscat means the museum cataloging system. So the first description of this very much more powerful search system was written by Martin Porter, second edition in 1989. Next one, please. This was what we were developing in the late second half of the 1980s. And on TV here, you may recognize a young version of myself there. And Sarah over there, the director of our museum, anthropology at Cambridge, Anita and Julian Jacobs. So this was a small team working on new media. Some of you may have heard of them, but in the 1980s, the Japanese invented a new form of data storage called a video disk, or optical disk, which worked in a machine like this, about that size. Have any of you heard of an optical disk, video disk? No? Well, anyway, it's still useful now. You can put onto it, right with a laser, and it can put 51,000 images onto one side of the optical disc. And it's got two soundtracks. So you can, for the first time, we could put photographs, films, music onto something which could then be linked to a computer. So this is the next stage in our project. So the computer not only can begin to understand and interrogate natural language, but also images, films, sound, music. And again, Cambridge was at the forefront of this kind of work. For example, the Cambridge Computing Laboratory was a tall building, and in the middle of the building they made coffee at 11 o'clock in the morning. But it wasn't always at the same time, and the people in different offices would rush down to get some early coffee, and they got fed up being the last people. So they pointed at us a camera, movie camera, at the coffee pot, and transmitted the moving images of the coffee pot bubbling. And when it was ready, people from the computing laboratory rushed down and got their coffee. This is the first time in the world that moving images are being put across the internet. So we developed multimedia computer systems with new fast interrogation and better data input. Next. And I worked on this extensively, and Sarah and I developed a system called Bamboo, fast, flexible flexible, user-friendly information retrieval system. And into this we can put multimedia data, put photograph, film, music. It has a double search system, so you can specify variables like date or name or person or place, and a string of text which you search probabilistic. So I could, in a year or two, I could put in Shenzhen 2024 lecture to students about digital intelligent machines. And it would take me straight to this film that was being taken at the moment of this lecture. So Sarah and I put in all the material from our 19 visits to China, from our 20 visits to Nepal, our 8 visits to Japan, all our home diaries, all my lectures. It's got many, many databases, and I can find anything about that past just by asking a question. And it's described in this short manual. Thanks. So this is a more modern computer. This is now a few years old. But this computer, which might be 10 years old, is less powerful than your smartphone. So the technology just improved rapidly, and just to finish up, I'll just go into the last 20 years or so very quickly, beginning with computers like this. This you know about, but if you take the social web, I've taken our projects up to about 1990. 1998 with Google and Huawei started in 1998. And you can see this is only taking it up to 2012. You can see what happened with the social web. You can see what happened with Facebook, just started in 2004. And if this graph went on, both these things. So the iPhone only started in 2010. So the expansion of all these things meant that it was possible to do new things with many of our projects. For example, I was doing interviews with famous people, and there were about 6 of the computer scientists who were behind this revolution. And they're all on the internet. And if you're interested in exploring some of this further, you'll find a lot of material on my website, which is www. And then my name, Macfarlane.com. You'll find links to what I've been talking about and other things. So in the last 20 years, really, everything has exploded, as you know. Next. I've put this in different forms, and this only takes it up to about 2015. So this is projections of the power of computing as against one mouse brain has been passed 2018 or something like that. One human brain about 2030, and all the human brains on the planet by about 2040. Next, please. This gives you the same thing, looking at the different kinds of computers, Mac, and supercomputers, and so on in this way. And then of these was equal to a bacteria, to a worm, to there's a mouse, a monkey, and a human being by 2030 or so. Next. And this is also now 7 years out of date, but the amount of text messages uploaded in one minute. So 16 million texts is 70,000 hours of Netflix watch 1 minute. And this must be 3, 4, 5 times as much now. Next. Some of you may have heard of Moore's Law. Have you heard of Moore's Law? Moore was an Intel engineer who in the 1970s suggested that the development of chip manufacture meant that the power of the computer, or the cost of the computer, was in another way. Power of the computer doubled every 15 months. So it's exponential. It'll double, like that. So that was one law. And you see in one technology, which is the cost of sequencing a human genome. And Moore's law predicts that the cost will come down at that rate. Even that's exponential. More recent law was developed by someone called Flatley, and because of new DNA sequencing, you see the speed at which that has improved over the cost. It's now, at the beginning, it cost millions and millions to sequence the human genome. Now, you can do it for a few pounds. And that's true of many technologies now. Next. There are many benefits to all of this. This is the wonderful information store which we have in the West, which is more difficult for you to access. Wikipedia, which is free and has extraordinary, wonderful information about many subjects, and mostly pretty accurate. So this is the growth of the number of articles on Wikipedia in the last few years. Next. Another benefit is in medicine. This is now quite old, but basically this shows the proportion of people who, when they are ill, who first go to the internet, check what is wrong with them. So in Luxembourg, 71% will go and try and find out what's wrong with them before they bother a doctor. And there will be more and more of this. And you'll only need to go and see a doctor in a few cases. Most of the internet will be able to diagnose you. Next. If you're interested in some of the things I've said and other things, this is just the last slide. I wrote a series of 10 little books called Master's Letters to Young Chinese. So I wrote that for a number of two of you here and others. And they're being translated at the moment and published by China Science and Technology Press in the next 2 or 3 months in a number of books. And one of them, which is relevant to you, is called How Can We Survive? And it takes 8 big problems like global warming, or population growth, or war. And one of them is how we can live with digital media. So I haven't talked much about artificial intelligence into the future, and that may be something we want to discuss, whether in fact machines that I've been talking about are intelligent. in any sense. And that, of course, depends on your definition of what is intelligence. But I hope I've shown you that the world you now inhabit is very, very new, very, very different. And just to show you a few roots, a story from your ancestors. Sarah and I are your ancestors, and we helped build a world which has now ended up you sitting with your smartphones and connected to the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Macfarlane, for taking us on this historical trip of development of computers. Let's take some questions from the audience. Yes, please. Lady first?
Thank you very much, Professor Macfarlane. My name is Wade, and I'm assistant professor at Shenzhen University at the Area Studies Group. I'm very interested about your book about artificial intelligence, and I'm interested in what role can Shenzhen play in your book. Because Shenzhen, if we look at it in the 1870s, it was a very different place. And if you look at 1970s, it's very different as well now. But they look at artificial intelligence, look at the headquarters of artificial intelligence companies in Shenzhen, where employees is working in the sectors in the city. This is tremendous. And I'm curious, how would you describe a city like Shenzhen in your book and in the anthropological or historic way? Of course, Shenzhen has any other interesting issues, but particularly artificial intelligence, how much can Shenzhen appeal in your book? Thank you. 我需要用中文再重复一下。
I'm very deaf, so I think what I heard was you were saying, what part does Shenzhen? None. Not because Shenzhen isn't amazing and important, and my wife and I have been here 4 or 5 times, and in many ways it's my favorite Chinese city. And I pointed out to people in my country and elsewhere as the future. It's a chance for us to move from ancient Europe to the future of the world. So imaginatively, Shenzhen plays a huge part in the background to my feelings about the future of human beings in cities and so on. But I know very little about what contribution Shenzhen has actually made to the development of artificial intelligence. You will know that I know nothing about it, and therefore there was no reason for me to say in Shenzhen they have a research center which has done this or done that. I'm afraid I'm very ignorant, but perhaps afterwards you can tell me more about where I should have put in Shenzhen. Okay.
Good afternoon, Professor Macfarlane, and I'm Kendra, and I'm a high school student from Shenzhen Senior High School. And I found your speech very inspiring because we're living in the AI era right now, and me myself use AI quite a lot during my study. So I have some questions. First is how might advancements in AI influence job market and employment opportunities for future generations? Because I saw the graph of exponential growth of intelligent machines that will in fact it will be better even than a rat's brain and human's brain, and I found that very interesting, and I'm wondering how much would AI influence the job market and employment opportunities for future generations like us.
Thank you. Well, that's obviously a very important problem which I talk about in this book a little bit. One way to look at it is to set the AI revolution within a set of technological revolutions which have occurred in human history over the last 10,000 years. The first one was the movement from hunting and gathering to settled agriculture, and that changed the world. The next one was in the 19th century, 18th, 19th century, with the Industrial Revolution. That replaced a lot of the workers who worked in the fields. They were replaced by machines, and a lot of the people who worked in the factories increasingly, well, firstly the factories replaced craftsmen around the world, and then later the people in the factories and the mines were replaced by machines. So each development of a technology, and each technology is an extension of a human being, each one makes a whole set of people no longer necessary for doing that job. And the next revolution, so the first revolution has replaced human muscles because you had machines, cars, and factories with robots and so on. The next one was the one in the computing revolution, which in theory replaced a lot of what was called white-collar work, that is secretarial, administrative kind of work, in the last part of the 20th century. So gradually, if you look at the social structure, the working class was replaced, the middle class was replaced, and now a very small group at the top, people like you, who are going to be what you could call the professional classes, the doctors, the teachers, the lawyers, university professors and so on. They won't be replaced, but one person, one lawyer, one doctor, will be able to do the work of 20. So the question then is, what do the other 19 do? So what my suggestion here is that we are moving towards a world where the people who are being replaced will become and can become just like the very, very, very small surface section of people who existed in nearly all societies in the past who didn't have to work. So, for example, in China, the Mandarins, they didn't do any physical work. They just administered a bit, but they also wrote poetry, and they had calligraphy, and they had tea ceremonies and so on. In my country, it was the country gentry and the aristocracy. They lived on their estates. They didn't work. They had servants and other people. In India, it's the religious people, the Brahmins and so on. So we are moving towards a world where everyone, in theory, and almost everyone, can be doing what they want to do: paint, write poetry, run an art gallery like my friend Eugene here, develop their creativity. They don't have to go into an office, and they don't have to work long hours. Now, in order to move to that world, we have to completely rethink everything about our society. For example, the idea of the Chinese labor market, where many people work very long hours, 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, is ridiculous. If you just said to everyone in China, you only work 1 day a week, that 1 day a week is, for that we will pay you enough for you to live comfortably, because the machines will be producing goods and so on. So So one day a week you log in and do some work. The rest of the time is up to you. You can go for holidays, you can go traveling, hitchhike, you can paint, you can do what you like. So we will have to move to a world where the scarce resource is not human labor or human minds, but work, meaningful work is scarce. And so you divide it out equally among everyone who wants to do a bit of work. If you don't want to work, that's fine. Combined with that, you do a whole lot of other things. One is you change the whole idea of education. All of you here are, almost all of you are aged between about 18 and 30. Now, we have a model from history that you are a child, then you go to school, then you go to university, and then you do your job for the rest of your life. That will disappear. You will have a world where everyone is constantly being re-educated or have a chance. You will be given coupons at the beginning of your life, 100 coupons, and you can spend 5 of them on your first school and then go and do something different. 5 when you come back. And through your life you'll be constantly being retrained, learning new experiences and discovering new worlds. So it could, if we manage it properly, lead to a much more pleasant, much more creative and interesting world for everyone. Unfortunately, human beings, with their infinite capacity for lapsing up and making mistakes, may not develop in this sensible direction. And instead you will find possibly that 1% of the population who are mega rich and super rich will take all the work and make all the rest of the population poor and doing some rubbish. But it could be optimistic. So don't all worry that you're going to have nothing to do, but do think of positive alternatives in a world which will be fundamentally changed by artificial intelligence. Okay?
Thank you so much for the answer.
Dear Professor Macfarlane, I want to ask a question, and that is, so new industries are continue to seep into different careers. For example, computers, they seep into different careers within like 20 years. So can you make a prediction about how long can artificial intelligence get into all sorts of careers, like all sort of investigations? Thank you.
How long and how far can artificial intelligence spread into all different kinds of... Well, Turing's view, even in 1936, was that if a problem is solvable by logic, then computer, universal machine, can universally solve all problems. So, in theory, a computer could at least be partly involved in anything you can think of. And it might not be a very good tennis player or football player. So some sports maybe not be terribly good at some high-end creative activity, music or painting, though it's quite good at that. It's difficult to see what areas it couldn't get into. And if anyone can think of one, it can beat human beings at chess and Go and things like that whole step. The real question is this intelligence? Are these, when you use artificial intelligence, you're basically using a machine that doesn't understand what it's doing, doesn't understand in the human sense. If you said to it, what is love? what is beauty. It can give you dictionary definitions, but it has no feeling of what love or beauty are. It just knows the answers, but it doesn't know how you got to the answers. So, for some years to come, probably during your lifetime, there won't be intelligent machines in the human intelligence sense. When I showed you that graph, there will be a machine that has the intelligence of all the human beings on this planet. All it means is the logical calculation power of all the human beings on this planet. But one human being at that time will know and understand things which no machine will be able to understand. And I think one of the reasons for this is that if you think about how you know about the world, you don't learn about the world by logical, rational reading books and looking at patterns of words, which deep language models do. They look at association, statistical association between patterns of words, and then giving answers. The way you and I learn is through the five senses, through the ear, eye, nose, mouth, and touch. Now, one of the great theorists of how we learn and understand the world, a great book on human understanding was by the 18th century Scottish philosopher David Hume. And he said human beings learn through sense impressions. They see, feel, and hear, and so on. These impressions I get from looking around here, going through my eyes and ears into a calculating mind machine, which puts them into patterns, which takes previous experience and makes sense of them all. So there are two stages. Now, as yet, as far as I know, artificial intelligence machines just look at, they can now look at images, so they do have something approaching a visual pattern recognition. But until they can actually have all the five senses, until we can give them a plate of Chinese food, and they can say, that was delicious, and really feel it and know why it was delicious. Until they can hear in the way we can hear, see, and feel. All those senses are there. Till that time, and they've worked out how, because people don't understand how the human mind works, but if they can learn more enough to make a mind that can take sense impressions, and you have an AI machine which is standing as I am, listening, watching, smelling. Until that time, they won't be intelligent. So it's probable that there will be some decades, may not be before the end of the century, which gives you time to live your lives, be happy before the machine takes over. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mac, for your speech. It's very good to see that. Speaking of your theory of the great transformations of economic activity throughout the history, like from hunter-gatherer to you mentioned to settle agriculture and then the industrial revolution and then the AI technology, I wonder how much economic activities were transferred from manual labor to intelligent works. And speaking of that, when was the first occasion when the information retrieval system, as you discussed, was first adopted by, say, economics department in your university? Because I'm a doctoral student of economics in Shenzhen University, so I'm interested in the economic professions in your university's adoption of computing technology and information retrieval system, even from the early stages before they spread like lenses to other works and the wider society and so on. Thank you very much.
I know the first one is what's the proportion, like how much is the physical or manual work being transferred to economics? Being transferred in a
也许您可以用中文说一下。他有点听不大清。
Thank you very much for your speech. Speaking of the three transformations of the economic activity throughout history, like from hunter-gathering to settled agriculture, and then industrial revolution, and then now AI technology. Because I'm a doctoral student at Shenzhen University of Economics, I'm interested in how much economic activities were transferred from manual labor to intelligent works. And speaking of that, when was the first occasion the information retrieval system you mentioned was first adopted by economics department and economics researchers in your university before they were widely spread out in the wider society? You are a historian and anthropologist in your university, but did your economics colleagues in Cambridge University adopt information retrieval systems as early as you did, or they were into that much later when everybody else was already using that?
The first part of your statement, which was about the movement from hunter-gatherers through to modern systems, seemed not entirely connected with the question, which was how far my colleagues in economics were using early information retrieval systems in Cambridge, or were they not particularly interested. I don't really know, because I try and avoid economists if I can, although there were some very good ones in my college, like John Maynard Keynes and so on. As far as I know, economists tend, one of the reasons I avoid them is that I'm not good at mathematics, and a lot of them are quantitative economists, and so they wouldn't be interested in using computers in the way I was using them for language manipulation. They would be interested in statistical correlations between variables, and that wasn't what I was in the slightest bit interested in. But I think quite early, the economics faculty obviously was using computers, but more as a kind of glorified calculating machine and correlative statistical kind of activities, rather than the kind of natural language computing I'm talking about. So I think they weren't particularly interested. Certainly no economist ever talked to me.
Good afternoon, Professor. My name is Yifan Yang. I'm a staff from the International Office. And thank you for sharing your historic perspective of the development of the modern machines. And I wonder if you would share more of anthropology's point of view in the upcoming Chinese translation of your work. And my question is actually, I'm a new reader of yours, of your masterpiece, and I cannot speak for people from Japan or people from Nepal, but for the part I read about what you wrote about Chinese in China, and I cannot stop thinking, wow, how precise your insights are, and all your understanding of Chinese people and its current development, and some unspoken rules of the Chinese society are very correct and very insightful. And could you please share some techniques that students and teachers can take away when they're facing a new or foreign culture, and for them to have a general but quite correct understanding of something new? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the short answer is you should have come to my lecture yesterday, which was about this subject, about how you understand other civilizations and the methodology of understanding them. I haven't got the book here, but I've written a book which has recently been published in Chinese called China, Japan, Europe, and the English world, a comparative analysis. And in the start of that book, I outline the methodology which I use for understanding different civilizations. In the talk yesterday and in the book, I refer to several methods. One is that you must get outside your own culture. You must work comparatively. You won't understand China if you just stay in China and think about China. If I asked all of you how China works, hardly any of you will have any idea of how China works. You will have about as much idea of how China works as you have of how your iPhone works or how your car works, because you're right in the middle of it. It's all around you. You just take it for granted. You go along in it. You intuitively can drive or make your way in this society, but without any formal analytical understanding of it. So the first thing is you must compare. And that's, as I said yesterday, when someone asked me how to do that, I said, go off, go somewhere else. Don't just sit in China. How many of you have spent serious time, not just a weekend in Malaysia or Thailand, something, but a serious period of a few weeks really trying to get inside, living in another country other than China, mainland China and Hong Kong? Hands up, those of you who have been outside. 3, 4. So the first thing is when you have the opportunity, get some comparative dimension by going somewhere else and then looking back at your own society. The second method I use, is a lot of understanding of a culture, wherever it is, can be learned if you look at the very simplest, earliest form of that particular culture. If you want to understand a tree, a big tree, you go back to the very small seed or nut that was planted, and you examine that, out of which the whole huge tree grew. If you want to look at a great river like the Yangtze or Pearl River, you go back to the spring from which it flowed and watch it growing and changing over time. If you want to understand your own life, as I did mine, you go back to your childhood and you examine it, as I did in many volumes, from the time when I was born, and people wrote about me, through my education up to the present. So the point of origin, or the point of departure, which is what the topic of the political scientists call it, is another way. Another way is to look at things not in themselves, but in relation to something else. So if you just look at some feature of your society, like the economy, or the family system, or Buddhism, you won't learn very much. But if you look at Buddhism in relation to, say, tea, or the economy in relation to the political system, structural relationship between bits is the way to understand any single part. And finally, you've got to realize that civilizations, like rivers, like trees, like humans, have a deep structure which generates what you see on the surface. So well below, for example, China. Your present Chinese world, you think is something maybe that has been made in the last 100 years or so. But in fact, your China was made thousands of years ago. Much of what you think, feel, and how you act is a result of things that happened at the time of Confucius and Mencius and the first Qin Emperor and before that, and has flowed on to where it is now. And that idea of a deep structure, which was the idea that revolutionized, for example, linguistics in the work of Chomsky, deep grammatical structures which generate what you see on the surface, or you find it in the work of the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu or Foucault or whatever, that there is a deep underlying feature which generates the surface. That's the way to begin to look at all the manifestations on the surface as different aspects of something coming up from much deeper. Okay? But also the volumes I mentioned in this series, there are 10 little books grouped into 3 volumes, and 3 or 4 of them are precisely about how to study other civilizations. The one I wrote for the lady who is filming me here, Yi Shuo, is about how you do anthropological comparative fieldwork. So there are short guides which will be published in Chinese later in the year, which will answer your question. Okay?
Good afternoon, Professor. Lovely to meet you again. So, I didn't have time to introduce myself yesterday. So my name is Evan, and I'm a student, major in business administration. So my question today is that, as we can see in the graph you showed to us, that the growth of the computer is much more faster than we think. So, and like you said, that there are so many jobs that are no longer necessary for us to do, especially in my major. So, and there are also a debate that whether we should take some measures to, control or change the situation, that the growth of the artificial intelligence, because it's much more faster than we think. So, what do you think about that? Should we take some measures like set some rules? Because there are some classic rules like never betray human or something. And what do you think about that? Thank you.
With any new technology, being an extension of human beings, you need to set some parameters and rules about behavior, whether it's a military technology or printing or any of the others, because all technologies have good and bad sides, and human beings would be foolish not to recognize that each of these technologies can do great damage, and we should be as careful and vigilant to try and protect not only ourselves but others from the effects of these technologies. And as you know, that every country now, China has built up a set of regulations for artificial intelligence, and countries all over the world are trying to do that. The one you mentioned, which is that these machines shouldn't harm human beings, is of course one of the rules that was applied to robots, and some of the rules were designed by some of the great science fiction writers. Machines should not attack a human being. That sort of rule is rather vague, and the computer can change its mind and decide it wants to, because one of the rules of computers is self-preservation, so they may defend themselves and attack a human being. But the problem is that the speed at which all this is happening, and the complexity of it is unprecedented, really. We still haven't really controlled the computer world or the internet, and that grew over a longer period and was less complex. So we should try to do so. But I'm not very optimistic that we will make more than a marginal difference to what will happen, especially as there are huge vested interests in competitive development of these things. So it's another example. For example, where if you're going to be successful, you still have to do it at the world level. It's no good if China or controls artificial intelligence and North Korea develops entirely different machines which don't abide by those laws. So it needs world government of some kind to make it world standard. And we're so far away from that kind of world government at the moment, unfortunately. So we should try, but whether we'll succeed.
Thank you.
Due to time limitation, that will be the end of the Q&A session. Sorry. And thank you again for bringing us a wonderful speech. Thank you.